As time goes on, many stories, cultures, and accomplishments from the past become lost to the sands of time. Some cultures, like the Egyptians, Greeks, and Romans, are well known and studied, but others have been forgotten, even though they made important contributions to history. We'll talk about the top 10 forgotten civilizations you've never heard of and bring their stories back to life. Number 10. The Liangzhu Culture. The Liangzhu culture grew in the Yangtze River Delta of China from about 3300 BCE to 2300 BCE. Its beautiful jade objects are what make it known as the Jade Culture. These objects, which are often very carefully carved with symbolic designs, show that the people who made them were very smart and skilled. The jade items like kong, tubular objects, and bai discs often had religious and ceremonial meanings, which shows how complicated their beliefs were. New finds of huge water management systems show that they were also very good at engineering. These systems, which include dams and canals, show that people have a good understanding of hydrology and how to take care of their surroundings. The sudden end of the Liangzhu society is still a mystery, but climate change and flooding are probably to blame. Geological evidence supports the idea that heavy summer rains could cause flooding. This makes their story a warning about how vulnerable the environment is. The Liangzhu culture's artifacts are still around today and show how advanced early Chinese societies were. Number 9. The Kingdom of Champa. From about 192 CE to 1832 CE, the Kingdom of Champa ruled over what is now central and southern Vietnam. They built beautiful Hindu and Buddhist shrines like the UNESCO-listed My Sun Sanctuary. The Cham people were also good at trading and sailing. They built strong sea routes that linked Southeast Asia to India and China. This made it possible for people to trade things, ideas, and religious practices. Their society was a mix of native traditions and Indian influences, which made their art and architecture very different. With their red brick buildings and sandstone statues, the Cham temples show that they used advanced building methods and artistic skill. The Chams were strong, but in the end they were absorbed into the growing Vietnamese empire. Their buildings, some of which are still standing today, show how good they were at engineering and making art, though many have been damaged by war and neglect. You can still find Cham customs and cultural influences in modern-day Vietnam, which shows how they had a lasting effect. Number 8. The Cahokia civilization. Cahokia, which was near St. Louis, Missouri today, was the biggest pre-Columbian city north of Mexico. It was active from about 1050 CE to 1350 CE. It had up to 20,000 people living there at its peak, and it had huge earthwork mounds like Monk's Mound, which is still one of the biggest man-made buildings in the Americas. Cahokia was a place where politics and religion came together. It had a complicated social structure and an economy based on farming, especially corn. Advanced urban planning can be seen in the way the city is laid out, the ceremonial plazas and astronomical lines. The Cahokians were very good at farming and trading. They built a system that connected them to people as far away as the Gulf of Mexico and the Great Lakes. Pottery, shell beads, and metal tools are examples of things that show a thriving trade economy. Still, their society fell apart because of things like running out of resources, climate change, and social unrest. The exact reasons for their decline are still being discussed, but what they did shows how complicated and flexible native North American cultures can be. The mounds of Cahokia are now a UNESCO World Heritage Site that shows how smart this ancient society was. Number 7. The Kingdom of Aksum. The Kingdom of Aksum was successful from about 100 CE to 940 CE. It was in what are now Ethiopia and Eritrea. Through its port of Adulis, Aksum was a major trading kingdom that linked the Roman kingdom to India and Arabia. Aksum was a very important city in the history of the area. It is famous for its tall stela and was one of the first places in Africa to accept Christianity. Its money, which is writing on it in both Greek and Ge'ez, shows that it has a sophisticated economy and is happy to trade with other countries. The kingdom's architectural successes include the building of huge obelisks with intricate carvings to honor rulers and important events. Environmental changes like cutting down trees and soil erosion, and the growth of Islamic trade routes that went around Aksum's lands led to its fall. Even though Aksum fell, its religious and cultural effects can still be seen in Ethiopia today. For example, the Ethiopian Orthodox Church has roots in Aksum, which shows that the civilization left behind a lasting spiritual heritage. Number 6. The Zapotec civilization. The Zapotecs lived in the Oaxaca Valley of Mexico around 500 BCE, long before the more famous Aztecs and Mayans. They built Monte Alban, a beautiful city known for its terraces, pyramids, and lookout towers. The Zapotecs made a calendar and one of the oldest writing systems in Mesoamerica. The layout of Monte Alban, which has tombs, ceremonial buildings, and carved stones showing historical events, shows how innovative they were in construction and city planning. Zapotec society was made up of city-states, and each one had its own leader. They relied on farming and trade to make money. Even though their society lasted for hundreds of years and had an impact on later civilizations, they are often forgotten when pre-Columbian history is talked about. Archaeological research keeps finding out more about their culture and showing a long history of artistic and technological progress. The UNESCO World Heritage Site Monte Alban is still a reminder of how smart they were. Number 5. The Hittites. The Hittites lived in Anatolia, which is now Turkey, from about 1600 BCE to 1178 BCE, and were a very powerful society. They are known for making improvements to chariot fighting and were some of the first people to make weapons out of iron, which gave them an advantage in technology over their opponents. In the ancient Near East, the Hittites were very important to the balance of power. This is shown by the Treaty of Kadesh with Egypt, which is one of the oldest known peace agreements. It was their capital, Hattusa, and it had advanced defenses and grand buildings such as huge gates with carvings in relief. The Hittites had very advanced legal and government processes, which can be seen in their large collections of clay tablets. Even though they had a lot of power, historians are still not sure what caused the society to fall apart in the Bronze Age. Theories range from invasions to internal conflict to climate change. Hittite texts and artifacts that were found again in the 20th century have helped us understand their past, but a lot about their society is still unknown. Scholars are still interested in what the Hittites brought to military tactics, government, and diplomacy. Number 4. The Elamite civilization. From about 2700 BCE to 539 BCE, the Elamite civilization lived in what is now southwestern Iran. The Elamites lived at the same time as the Sumerians and Babylonians. They made important changes to art, building, and government. They made their own writing system and language that had nothing to do with other cultures nearby. This made them stand out as a separate group. Elamite art often had very detailed jewelry and pottery, which showed a high level of skill. Even though they did great things, the Elamites were often overwhelmed by their neighbors in Mesopotamia. Eventually, they were absorbed into the Persian Empire. However, it is clear that they had a big impact on Persian culture. Many administrative and artistic practices can be traced back to Elamite customs. Number 3. The Minoan civilization. The Minoan civilization thrived from about 2600 BCE to 1100 BCE and was centered on the island of Crete. The Minoans were the first people in the Mediterranean to trade by sea. They built beautiful buildings like Knossos and painted lively scenes from everyday life on their walls. They made an early writing system called Linear A, which hasn't been deciphered yet, which adds to the wonder of their history. There is proof that women were involved in religious and political life in Minoan society, which suggests that it was fair for everyone. A lot of the time, natural disasters like earthquakes and the eruption of Thera, Santorini, and Mycenaean invasions are blamed for the decline of the society. They brought new ideas to Greek art and architecture that influenced later Greek society. They connected the ancient and classical worlds. Number 2. The Nok Culture. They lived in what is now Nigeria and did very well from 1000 BCE to 300 CE. The Nok people made some of the first tools and weapons in sub-Saharan Africa that were made from iron. They were also known for their beautiful terracotta statues. Later African cultures like the Yoruba and Benin were inspired by their unique style of art, which had lots of small details and faces with lots of expression. Even though they were very creative, a lot of their past is unknown because there isn't much archaeological evidence to help us figure out how they lived. The terracotta images, which often show people and animals, show how they practiced religion and society, which suggests they lived in a rich and complicated society. Number 1. The Indus Valley Civilization. The Indus Valley Civilization, sometimes called the Harappan Civilization, is still not as well known as other civilizations from the same time period like Mesopotamia and ancient Egypt. This society thrived from about 3300 BCE to 1300 BCE in what is now Pakistan and northwest India. It had advanced city planning, drainage systems, and standard units of weight and measure. Cities like Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa were carefully planned, which suggests that the people who lived there were very well organized. The fact that the Indus script hasn't been deciphered adds to the mystery of their society, leaving us to wonder about their government, religion, and daily life. Changes in the environment, like changes in river patterns and too much use of resources, are often blamed for the decline of the society. Even so, their improvements in building and city planning still have an effect on how cities grow today. These lost civilizations, each with its own successes and stories, show how strong and creative people can be. They help us learn more about our shared past and the different paths that different societies have taken over time. Their contributions to the world are still being felt in ways we are only now starting to understand.